and Mr. Richardson's part to play the British card as the best alternative as compared to going the direction of where
Guatemala.
Where Mr.
You see,
President.
because well, first of all, you'll notice the name of the party we formed, Honduras Independence Party. We, on the other, of course, we joined up with the National Party, which comprised of a group, a small group, a compact group, but nevertheless a group that was together of what you may call the old loyalist element, you see. This party, by the way, was founded by Sir Harrison Courtney. He was the first president of the party. And it included people like E.O.B. Barrow and a number of other people. But nevertheless, they wanted to preserve certain traditions. We, like people like Richardson and myself, we want to move forward, both politically and independent, and economically and socially. And hence the word independence in the title of the party.
So independence was always your objective?
Oh, yes. And Richardson's objective as well.
And how did you get caught in this mode of appearing to be
because
anti?
of PUP propaganda.
Anti.
PUP propaganda. The PUP kept on calling us colonialists and whatnot and so on, and we were not able to shake the label. There wasn't truth in it, but we did not intend to, you see, Price wanted to throw overboard things like celebration of Battle of St. George is key, the Baymen, the history of the Baymen. In fact, he wanted to cut out the history, Belizean history totally, as we then knew it. And we would not agree to this. And he denounced those things, Belizean traditions and so on, as British colonialism. In other words, we had to wipe out our history totally, and to suit him and his plans to get us into the Guatemalan trap. In fact, eventually the Guatemalan president declared that the Battle of St. George's Key was a myth, never took place. And that was echoed in Belize by Price, you see, who then began, first tried to kill the Teta Suprema celebrations totally. When he failed, he then had rival celebrations, but said that this had nothing to do with any mythical battle. It was a celebration of the independence which we would get in the future. So Belize became the first country to celebrate its independence before he got it, you see.
Well, let's move very rapidly, since our time is very limited. We don't want to run out of tape here.
Sure.
On a personal note, I know that in that important election, 1954, that you also got married.
Yes, I got married on the morning of election day. This came about quite accidentally because we had fixed our wedding day before the government fixed the date of election. When the two events coincided, there was a lot of wringing of hands and people saying that you must postpone your wedding. But of course I said, no, I picked the day first, so I see no reason why I should postpone my wedding. But it went all right. I went to church that morning, got married, and took my wife home, and then I went out to the hustings, and when I saw her again, I was an elected member of the House.
So that was a sort of a fitting wedding present from
right.
the people of Belize.
Yes.
Well, we know that you, of course, went on to form this new party and this whole new thrust, but you no longer had the partnership of Mr. Lee Richardson. Mr. Lee Richardson left, went into exile, went into another part of the Caribbean, where he lived in Trinidad for...
He now lives in New York.
Now lives in New York. Lived there for almost 30 years. He lived in Trinidad. Then he...
First Jamaica, then Trinidad.
I know that one of the things that you were also doing was developing relationship with Belizeans abroad. Could you tell us what was the reason for your attempt to develop and to sort of include Belizeans abroad in the political process?
Well, I believe and still believe that the Belizean nation should be treated as one, in particularly in view of the Guatemalan um, uh, claim on Belize. I think, and also in the interest of economic development, uh, um, as an economic development strategy. The Belizeans who came overseas have um, acquired skills and education and so on, which could be very useful to Belize as a whole. And I think this should be tapped. I feel that we should not wait until they retire then to come home just to settle down. I think that Belizeans, wherever they are, right now, in this age of instant communication in a written way and also by voice, and also almost instantaneous transportation, should contribute in every way they can in the national development and in the defense of the homeland. They can, I feel that they should be facilitated in voting for Belize, in Belizean elections, especially in the view of the uncontrolled immigration into Belize by Central Americans in particular.
When you say this uncontrolled immigration, we're talking now about 1992, and we know that...
But what has happened during the past 10 years in particular, but has become more intensified since the 90s began.
We know that the latest UN report on refugees in Belize state that we have well over 30,000.
Oh yes, far more than that.
And is your belief that it's far more than that? How far would you put the figure?
Well, I've heard the figure of 66,000 mentioned, and some estimates put it even at 100,000. But you have trouble getting accurate figures. And then Mr. Musa declared in the House that there's no way the government can control the flow of immigrants into the country, and so it's no use trying. The Refugees Bill that was passed, the Refugees Act, provides that if an alien comes into the country, the police has to deal with him. If he claims that he comes as a reason of fear of his life or fear of persecution, then the police must turn him over to the Refugees Board. And of course the board has to take his own word as to whether he's a genuine refugee or not. Another thing is the law provides that the refugee must be facilitated by the minister in becoming a Belizean citizen as soon as possible. And of course, once he becomes a citizen, he goes on the voters list. So that's the situation we have. And I have no doubt that if this continues in the next 5 years, aliens or refugees will form a significant part of our voters list.
There's also a shifting of the traditional ethnic balance in Belize, where blacks used to be in the majority,
yes,
have now become the minority.
And even the mestizo up in Corozal, Kaya, feel threatened today by this influx of Central American aliens into the country.
Because they look at them as being different than the culture that we're used to in Belize.
That's right.
As you know, it is estimated that some say conservatively there's over 60 to 70,000 Belizeans who are living outside of Belize, many of whom live right here in Southern California. We know that over the years, both the PUP as well as the UDP government have been given lip service to the need to include Belizeans in the development process. But to a great extent, it has remained more an idea as opposed to an energetic movement on the part of either parties to really include Belizeans in a dynamic way in this development process in Belize. What ideas do you have in terms of seeing Belizeans actively involved in the process of development, and what are your ideas behind to support this inclusion?
Well, as I said, it's my firm belief that it's in Belize's interest that Belizeans on the whole face of the earth should become involved in restoring their ownership of Belize, and should be involved in the management of the nation, in the making of policies, in serving in government, that we cannot, with a small population, fragment our human resources simply because of geography.
Okay. Mr. Goldson, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks and appreciation for this opportunity of getting a chance to talk with you at length on some aspects of history that I'm sure will be quite revealing to many of our viewers and listeners to this particular interview. There was so much covered, and I'm sure that there's much more. There is, maybe we need to do a part 2 and a part 3 in getting you to cover as much of that history that I'm sure you have for us. But I'd like to give you an opportunity to make a final statement or comment before we close.
Well, Nuri, I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity. In order to state my philosophy, if you want to call it my political philosophy, there have been 2 things that have motivated me in my political career. One, to help Belize establish a democratic system, a parliamentary democratic system. I think to some extent that has been achieved, but it's been threatened by recent events. But my second, and perhaps my foremost reason for being in politics is that to use political action, because we have no other recourse, we have no military might, no diplomatic skills, and so we have to use political action to protect the country from Guatemala, to defend our country. That one is, which I thought had been successful, we now find, as it were, blown up in our face. We have to fight the battle all over again, and we have to fight it because whereas in the 1950s when after POP there was only one political structure to contend with, now we have 2. We have the POP and the opposition UDP.